Welcome back to the Life Well Led podcast. My name is Karen Ledady, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Eric Hebschel.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we are going to be talking about workplace culture and why it is so incredibly important.
It is so damn important, and it's our bread and butter. This is what we do for a living, is help companies with their workplace culture. So, yeah, this is a fun topic for us.
I think workplace culture feels like one of those buzzwords right now. I'm seeing it everywhere, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that people are really fed up with working for terrible companies.
Being post-COVID, people have seen and realized that their life is not worth waiting until 65 in order to retire and do what they want.
Yeah.
Right? So it's outside of work and inside of work too. They don't want to have to work for a company that, and it's not always deliberate, but that doesn't value their employees enough to have a culture where they can feel like they're seen, heard, and can contribute, as well as valuing them for themselves outside of work as well.
Eric, it's interesting. You you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the fact that people here really are fed up. There was a study recently from the Workplace Institute. 60% of employees in this study said that their job is the biggest factor influencing their mental health. 60%.
Yeah, I mean, you're there almost 40 hours a week, if not more.
And this next fact really startled me. And it was that managers have just as much of an impact on an individual's mental health as their spouse.
To me, that's not surprising. Again, 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day. You're with your spouse in the morning and the evening, but not during the middle of the day usually. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
I mean, but you think about it. You think about how big of a responsibility it is and big of a decision it is when you decide that you're going to take the next step with somebody, to get into a relationship with them, whether they're your significant other, whether they're a long-term significant other or a spouse. I mean, that is such a commitment. Culturally, we talk about it as such a commitment, but we don't talk about our careers being as big of a commitment as that. But these studies are showing that they have the same impact on our mental health.
It's kind of been under the surface for quite some time. It seems pretty obvious to me, but I also understand that it hasn't been articulated very well.
Yeah.
So being able to say that, yeah, my job affects my mental health, because we look at, here in America especially, a value of what we do is what we do for work. That's not necessarily the case everywhere, and that's probably something we can look at down the road as far as our, collective societal values. But it does actually matter what you do for a living and whether you enjoy it or not. You can be a solopreneur, you can be the head of a Fortune 500 company, you can be a male person, you can be whatever you want to be. As long as you're happy doing it, that matters more than a paycheck. And I think people starting to realize that since COVID, is that what you do and how you do it matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, I think COVID really opened our eyes to what is possible and what work-life balance could look like. And there really is no going back. It's interesting because Gallup did a poll in 2021, and they found that only 15% of employees worldwide were actually engaged in their organization.
Whoa, that's really bad.
15%.
That's really bad.
That means that 85% of employees are not engaged or disengaged with their organization.
Realistically, whatever that number is, skewed or not, there's a lot of people who are not giving that their very best every single day. Well, right? I mean, this is true. I've been there. You probably been there at some point where you're just not, you're part of you feel like you're part of the machine. You're a cog in the wheel. You don't have skin in the game. So why would they want to have that engagement if their culture doesn't breed that?
Yeah. And the Gallup poll also found that these disengaged employees are costing the U.S. economy $605 billion annually.
In productivity.
In lost productivity. And think about how much of that $605 billion was made up of Amazon mice that help you move so that your light stays green on your company's chat.
If you have to have a culture where that is part of KPIs and considering what you're doing, you got a problem with your culture. That's not
Yeah.
just the employee not paying attention and shopping on Amazon. That's also you having to dictate that. So whether it's the chicken or the egg argument, whoever started it, it doesn't matter. It's about understanding why you're there in the first place. You can be more productive and still treat people like human beings.
And just throwing on some more stats, 81% of employees would prioritize mental health over high paying jobs, and 64% admit that they would take a pay cut if it meant that their career supported better mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
been there, done that. I get that.
These are impactful stats when you start considering the impact of culture and what that looks like in your organization and how it can cost a business long term.
What is the impact here is really, I think, the big question. Like, why does this matter to the employee or the employer?
Yeah.
The impact comes down to whether you can keep talent, and ultimately, what is it that's the end result for the growth of your company or the growth of the employee value of, their career. If you don't have that vision in mind and you can't execute on that vision, then you're just there hamster wheel. Right? You're just there producing every single day for no reason and you don't have a vision. That's tough. And certainly as a business owner, that's not something that drives them every single day. If they're stuck doing the work every day and trying to put out fires, if you will, and it's just not, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And when you think about what value people look for in companies, the number one value is trust. People want to know that they have the authority, that they have the trust, that they have the responsibility, that you are actually saying that you're giving to them in a job description. They want to know that they have the ability to execute as you have outlined. And a lot of organizations don't allow that right now.
No, and they can be supportive of culture. They can be supportive of causes. That's great, but it's also not going to really make a difference if you don't enjoy the job that you're doing. Right. So, that how they spend their money and how they advertise and how they give back and provide employee resource groups is all wonderful. But that can be a Band-Aid to a bigger problem if you don't enjoy where you work every single day and they don't create the culture that allows people to thrive in that. So yeah, I mean, there's a problem with that here in the country, and I'm sure in the world too. I mean, look at the riots that have happened in European countries as well. I remember France and protests there as well. There is a problem. It's not the work environment today in corporate and public sector America or in general is not ideal, and it's not what people want anymore.
So I think when we start talking about culture, a very common next place to go is, well, how do I even define my culture? How do I even know what culture I'm in? And I would say that there's a consensus among a lot of the leadership professional community that has come up with 4 basic cultural types, right? So the first one is the family culture. And this culture is collaborative, emphasizes teamwork, really focuses on employees feeling that sense of belonging and camaraderie, fostering a lot of loyalty, retention. You don't see a lot of turnover in these organizations. And that's because there's a lot, it's more of a horizontal structure. Family organizations really care about what their employees say and how they're feeling, and almost to their detriment a lot of times, because it can take longer to make decisions if Joe's not on board with it and you want everybody's buy-in. It's just going to take longer because now you're not only worried about whether or not everybody agrees, you're worried about their feelings, you're worried about how it all plays together. So conflict resolution can be really challenging. And I think there's this lack of hierarchy in these organizations can lead to a lot of confusion about roles and responsibilities and who is actually making the decision.
This is varying degrees of each one. So as we go through all of these, it's important to understand that you are not one in particular, one all the time. You can be what degree are you? And to that extent, everybody seems to probably want this kind of structure because it's the most empowering, but without a somewhat of a structure in terms of who's being authorized to do something, that is a challenge. This is one of those organizations that usually are mission driven. So nonprofits, volunteers make up a lot of the workforce.
Yeah.
So that's really where you see these kinds of organizations involved, is on a horizontal structure or a familial structure, is usually with those, but in a corporate setting, that's not very common.
Yeah, I could say almost every nonprofit that has some sort of volunteer base as their main source of workforce, you see this very often.
Absolutely.
You
And
never
it's
want to hurt anybody's feelings because everybody's a volunteer and they're all just doing it out of the goodness of their heart.
right. And that's the thing, is you want to have more emphasis on people's emotions and people's values, but too much of that could be a problem.
Right. So the second structure is the adhocracy, and this is really the structure that allows and encourages innovation and creativity. Gives people the ability to experiment with new ideas. They're quick to adapt. They change to market conditions and opportunities. They're promoting a culture of learning and personal development, and they also are allowing their employees to engage and make empowering decisions and really take those risks that allow them to be that adaptive, innovative culture. On the flip side, though, high risk, high reward,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of these businesses with this model um, are it are what's good for the business, right? So risk of failure could be higher, and the result of failure could be more detrimental in these organizations because they're doing what's best for the business. They're not necessarily thinking about the individuals. And so this can create some difficulty in maintaining some consistency and some standards because you're trying new things. There's kind of a lack of structure in a lot of these organizations, and there is some resistance because people are accustomed to those traditional environments. So if you're getting an employee from, let's say, a completely one of these other three environments, and they're dropped into this environment where they're being asked to take a lot of risk, that could be really uncomfortable.
Yeah, but this is like the utopia one for a lot of business owners and some employees, right? Is the ability to have this kind of autonomy. It's a really difficult environment to maintain because of the need for people's needs for control, people's needs for
Yeah.
having things done their way, or people's just not having a great amount of trust, even if it's
Yeah.
not deliberate or malicious. It's just, God, I'm trusting my entire company based on this department's budget that could risk the entire investment of what we got. Yeah, that's scary stuff.
High risk, high reward.
High risk, high reward, exactly. But you know, in my opinion, and maybe yours too, that is the environment that really allows people to adapt and survive in tough situations.
Yeah. Well, like you said in the very beginning, I think a lot of cultures can have a lot of different pieces of this, and I think
Right.
there's good and bad of both. What I really like about this one is that it does give a lot of autonomy to the employees, that you're allowed to take risks, that there's a learning and personal development piece behind it, and because of that, a lot of employees feel empowered and they feel like they're bought into the mission of the company, and that is only going to help you when your employees are engaged and satisfied and feeling fulfilled in what they do.
This is kind of the target mark, or the target goal of companies when we work with them, right? Is that to have that ability to have a lot of buy-in. The high risk, high rewards part of that, I get that. But it's also understanding that if you take smart risks, you do experimental things, like there is a way to navigate this where it is not all your chips on the table on black and you have a 50-50 shot of losing all your money. That's not really the case here if you do it right. And
That
so
is how I play.
that's how you play
That
roulette.
is how I play
that is-
roulette.
all my money on black, please. All my money on red. No, but seriously, it's more like, if you look at a roulette table, it's more like you take little risks. You have $5 here in between the two squares on the two corners, or on the four corners here and there, and then you see which ones add up, and then you go to what works. And you lose a little bit of what does, but you don't lose your whole entire savings or your whole entire investment on it. So there's a lot of benefits to this type of organization. But again, it's a varying degrees. There are parts of your business that may need to have more hierarchical structure and predictability. And then other parts of it may be another department where it needs to be innovative, like the product creators versus those that, I don't know, maybe it's something on the front lines, maybe it's a mixture of both. But that's why there's really no good or bad structure. It's just a matter of where on the pendulum are we
Yeah.
in society, and when our corporate structure and government structure, et cetera, and organizations.
Yeah. So the third structure is this market structure. And this one really focuses on financial success and how each employee contributes to the bottom line revenue. So you often see these organizations, these are your typical sales, very strong focus on financial success, performance, accountability, KPIs, clear metrics and goals. It creates competitive environments that can drive innovation, can drive efficiency. You're often emphasizing customer satisfaction, how quickly you respond. But this also creates a really high pressure environment and leads to a lot of burnout because you're constantly in competition with your employees, with your fellow employees, with even your customers in terms of, making sure that their satisfaction is met even over other measures of success. And so you do see a lot of limited collaboration in
I
this
was going to say, I don't
environment.
think that there's a lot of innovation going on here. This is, unless it's a
Yeah.
fear environment,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Or
limited collaboration.
limited collaboration, but not a lot of innovation either.
Right.
People get things done based on fear or based on competition. And again, there are good pieces, like you do want to have some sort of qualifiable and quantifiable metrics. And this is a lot of quantifiable metrics,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry, we've had the pendulum where we have moved so far into the numbers and the KPIs that is not getting it done anymore. That is not how people want to work. That is not just the small minority complaining. That is the silent majority saying to themselves and to their families and to other coworkers, this doesn't work.
I think there's a lot of benefit to measurements and KPIs and measuring satisfaction, but also I think there is this, it needs to have a balance. There needs to be, it's hard to not create that competitive environment when everything is revolved around numbers.
I agree with that. And I also kind of disagree in the sense that it's all necessary. There's pieces of it that
There's
are
pieces
necessary.
of it that are
There are
necessary.
pieces of it that are necessary,
Yeah.
but I'm saying as it is right now, outside of the vacuum, in the world that we are today, we care so much about customer satisfaction and we don't even give a crap about the customer. We care about the survey result. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it has nothing to do with the actual customer being satisfied. It has nothing to do with the employee being satisfied, because that gets tanked. It has everything to do with what does the number look like on a sheet of paper. And it just ends up being in a spreadsheet. That's not human element. That's what's missing right now in a lot of organizations, is the human element. So yeah, there are things you need in terms of, measuring quantifiables, but a lot of this needs to go the other direction.
Yeah. Okay. And then I would say the last structure here is the hierarchy structure. And this is often seen in major corporations. There are clear and defined roles. There is a path and advancement opportunities that motivate people to move forward. So there are often really strict policies and procedures that minimize errors, ensure compliance, really doing things by the books. There's a process and a path for everything. And it's just such a rigid culture that it doesn't really offer a lot of flexibility, adaptability. A lot of innovation dies on the vine. It's really stifling for creativity, and people often are disengaged in these organizations because they don't feel like there is a place for their feedback, for their input, that they have really bought in to what the company is actually doing.
Yeah, this is where people's dreams go to die, is these organizations that have this too
Oh,
much
God.
structure. It does. I mean, this is like, it's top dog gets best performance, gets the new role, gets the top role. And the lack of innovation and creativity, and the lack of actual buy-in, and a lot of the times, but also the lack of the ability to contribute, will give the responsibility away from the money and give it to the few. And then it ends up being a lot of responsibility on the shoulder of a manager of the organization. That's either CEO, upper management.
Right.
You just keep escalating it up the chain. You just say, I got to go get my manager for this. I got to go get my manager for this. Yes, there is a need for structure. There's a need for people to be authorized to do things. But when it is that rigid, this is where people's dreams go to die.
Yeah, I agree with that. So really, those are the four structures. You've got the hierarchy, the market culture, the adhocracy culture, and the family culture.
So what is the takeaway that we have here when it comes to culture?
Well, I think first is awareness. Like, just the first step is always awareness, but just knowing that every single person has the ability to impact their culture.
Bingo.
Whether you're the top dog or whether you're the lowest person on the chain of command, you have the ability to impact your culture and to start having conversations that may be difficult at first, but changing the systems that could potentially impact the outcomes in which you're hoping for. So I think just kind of being aware of what the options are, maybe where you're living now, knowing what's at risk. 85% of employees are disengaged from their organization. 85%.
Again, whatever that number is, it's going to be high anyways. Because when you talk to other employees here in this country, especially, they're not producing the best that they could possibly produce. And that's not just on them. That's on you as the manager or the head of the organization and those who are middle management and anybody who has a leadership role. What is it that you need to do to get the best out of your people?
Yeah. It's time to take responsibility.
Yes.
It's time to just face the facts that gone are the days where you can be a terrible company and expect employees to stay with you. If you want to be here in 10, 15, 20 years, you need to start changing now. You need to start laying the foundation for what a good company, what the qualifications of what employees are looking for. You need to start doing that now.
We'll see you next time.